You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. Our performances was just lacked that intensity.
Every Monday morning here on OTB AM we go through the good, the bad and the grand when it comes to the weekend's action, and there really is only one place to start for anybody who is flicking through the channels over the course of the weekend, and it is in Saudi Arabia yesterday at the Formula 1. It was one of the most incredible races, according to people who know a hell of a lot better than me in the history of Formula 1, certainly one of the races of the season. An unbelievable season. And that, like, just before we get into this, Cher, have we given Drive to Survive a little bit too much credit for transforming the popularity of Formula 1? Because it certainly seems to me as if the main reason why everybody is obsessed with this particular season is because it is genuinely the best season in living memory in Formula 1. You've got one of the greatest sporting rivalries.
No.
Potentially, so it deserves a whole pile of credit for a certain degree of interest. But the reason why yesterday is being spoken about, the main reason why yesterday is being spoken about so much, is that you have two incredible drivers in this incredible rivalry. And I think Netflix have they've done an incredible job, but I think they're getting just a little bit too much credit, because the main reason why this is good is because of the actual sport, not because of the documentary.
But hang on, no one cared about the sport. The sport could have been great, but nobody cared about it for years and years and years and years, because it was completely closed shop. No one ever saw anything. No one ever knew anything about these people. And now all of a sudden people are interested in the mechanics and the engineers and the lads doing the... Hello, Santa.
He's here, 19 days early?
Yeah, a little early. No, I don't agree. I think that Netflix have done a great job of making the casual sports fan interested in flicking on at all. The fact that you do have a title race is great, but I don't think you would have had the interest in the title race, even if the title race was great, without the Drive to Survive phenomenon. And like, Netflix has become this global massive beast where they can turn anything into a TV show. And like, I mean, they made Tiger King popular, Eoin.
Yeah,
I'll never forgive them for that.
That's true, but like, I mean, in some sort of weird parallel universe, if there was an actual sporting event based on Tiger King, would you watch, what was the name, Joe Exotic? Would you watch Joe Exotic chase tigers in a sporting sense, or cage tigers? You probably wouldn't, whereas people obviously are interested in the sport here because the sport that is attached to it is really, really good. And of course, there's a bit of synchronicity going on here. The timing is great. It's both of these things coming to a head. But yesterday was just incredible. Like, if you missed this, it's worth going back, catching as much of the race as you can, catching a lot of the post-race interviews as possible. We might actually hear from Lewis Hamilton now, just to set the scene here, because he wasn't overly happy with Max Verstappen, I think it's fair to say, in the aftermath of the race. Here's Lewis Hamilton.
For me, I really had to try and just keep my cool out there, which was really difficult to do. Sorry, I can't hear so much. And like, I've raced a lot of drivers through my life in the 28 years. I've come across a lot of different characters, and there's a few like at the top which are kind of over the limit. Rules kind of don't apply or don't think of the rules. But today I just try to do my talking on the track, keep the car in between the white lines, and do it the right way. I was trying to catch, there's so many things were sent at us. Obviously, we got the pole, then we lost out, then I got back past, then he passed over the curb. Like, there was just so many different crazy curveballs that were sent.
In your mind, does Max fall into that category for you, about the drivers that you mentioned earlier?
He's over the limit for sure, but I mean, I've avoided collision on so many occasions with the guy, and I don't always mind being the one that does that, because you live to fight another day, which I obviously did. So
there's some great photographs on the back page this morning. The Daily Telegraph here, possibly the one where it's most clear, where you've got Lewis Hamilton with the trophy in the air and Max Verstappen with his hands on his hips in the background. He didn't join in with the champagne afterwards. He just walked off with his bottle and got out of there pretty quickly. He said afterwards, the sport is more about penalties than racing, and for me this is not Formula 1. A lot of things happened which I don't fully agree with, which just spices this up beautifully for next weekend.
We should talk about that, because that's the bit, right? What Now, I know nothing about what would have happened or anything beyond the Drive to Survive element of it. So we'll talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about later on in the week about this. But Verstappen was told, because of a penalty, to pull over and to allow his main rival for the title to pass him out. And he slowed down and allowed him to pass out. And that's the bit that we've just heard the clip of there, where Lewis Hamilton is pissed off about the fact that he ended up crashing into the back of him. Right, so he blames Verstappen, but he didn't know that Verstappen was slowing down on purpose to let him pass. So was it just bad communication? Was it a little bit of, let's spice this drama up a bit here? You know, what could we do to make this go all the way to the end? I'm not suggesting that anything so cynical as ratings and that kind of stuff would have factored into the decision making, but it cooks the soup nicely for next week.
There was this growing sense on Sky Sports throughout the evening, a bit more of a sympathetic tone towards Max Verstappen, because it did feel at the start that it was like, oh, this is a disgrace. You know, he really did just slow down deliberately in front of Hamilton, and he rammed into the back of him, and you know, this is not good from him. But as the evening progressed, it was kind of like, well, Hamilton didn't really know that the instruction was being given for him to overtake. Now, it did seem at the time, in fairness, Verstappen would deny this wholeheartedly, but it did seem at the time that he could have given Hamilton a little bit more room to pass him out, and didn't do so. Now, he says he gave him plenty of room, and you know, he says within the laws that was absolutely fine what he did, so you have to take his word for it. But it was the second time in the race that he was instructed to let Hamilton overtake him. So I'm sure, as a man with a massive ego, as a man with a massive competitive edge, you're like, twice in one race, and he was pretty aggrieved by the decision to actually let him do so. But he goes into the back of him, bit of debris falls off the car, and ultimately then when he does allow him to take over, Hamilton just takes it home. The thing that they were saying on Sky, though, throughout the evening as well, is that yes, this was a moment of really high drama, but the Red Bull tyres were in such a state that perhaps Mercedes would have won in the end, regardless of the penalties, regardless of being told to be allowed to overtake him. So maybe in the end we would have reached the end conclusion. But I think at the end of the day, going into the final weekend in Abu Dhabi, it's going to be an incredible weekend next weekend, tied on the same amount of points. It is. You couldn't write this, even if you were creating your own Netflix show. This is exactly what you would write. This is exactly what you would have going into your final episode of Drive to Survive with WWE. If this was completely fictitious, this is exactly the thing that you would script, and it just it sets things up perfectly for next weekend.
There'd be a love triangle as well. Obviously, they'd be interested in the same love interest, whoever that might be. That would be the only. It's like Days of Thunder, something bad like that from the 90s. Did you ever see Days of Thunder, Eoin?
No, I haven't. Come on, tell me about Days of Thunder. Give me the breakdown.
Well, one of Nicole Kidman's early Hollywood roles. Obviously, she was Australian and came through on a TV series called Bangkok Hilton and the movie Dead Calm, which was kind of a bit of a sleeper hit. But this was her big breakthrough because it was partnering Tom Cruise. Robert Duvall is playing Robert Duvall in it, and Tom Cruise plays Tom Cruise in it, and Nicole Kidman plays the love interest, who's a doctor and who gets sent into his room to see him after he crashes. It's like IndyCar, and he, you know, because she's too pretty, and in the 90s it was a Hollywood trope that pretty people couldn't be smart. He assumed that she's not a doctor, but in fact a stripper, and hilarity ensues, and they fall in love, and such is life.
Who is the Nicole Kidman?
Probably couldn't make that today now.
No.
Now that you say it out loud.
Yeah, no, that's very, very 1990 right there. That's very early Tom Cruise. We just got to find out who the Nicole Kidman is in all of this thing as they go to Abu Dhabi next week. Well,
it's going to be the director of whoever has the best car, isn't it? That's what the real love interest is for these guys. They only love themselves and their fast cars.
And that was one of the main images from last night. Like the narrative had swung in favour of Verstappen just for a brief moment when things were chaotic in the middle, where the camera shows inside the Mercedes team, and Wolff takes off his headset and absolutely slams it on the ground like a really annoyed NFL coach. You know, when like the headset, does Belichick give a lot of damage to the headset, or am I making that up completely? Like there was definitely some LSU coach a couple of years ago who made a big deal of destroying his headset. Well, Toto Wolff yesterday was very much in that mould, and it was just like, God damn it. And well, in the end, he was the winner.
Yeah, like Toto Wolff, for example. Would you have known who he was without Drive to Survive, really?
I think so, but
would you have had any interest in those backroom staff?
No.
Maybe the sport is actually and we're giving the credit to the wrong people here. The sport decided that it needed to drive to survive, and it needed to make the cars more interesting than just the cars. And that's the people who build the cars and fix the cars and hone the speed of every individual part of it. And they've done that really well. Like, it is a really good template for other sports to follow. Some sports don't need to, but other sports clearly do, because it was kind of moribund. It had become, irrespective of the quality of the driving, because Lewis Hamilton's been doing this level of quality for a decade and a half at this point, but no one really cared, did they?
I'd say people cared. Like, I think that's actually a really interesting point. I mean,
sorry, not in big numbers. Not big numbers of people. The dyed-in-the-wool petrol head fans who always cared about Formula One. But that number got smaller and smaller and smaller until they opened it up into the soap opera that it is now. Yeah, like I absolutely think that there's something there in terms of the world becoming aware of how unbelievably talented you have to be, how in the 0.0001% of talented drivers you need to be a Sergio Perez, for example. So to do what Lewis Hamilton has done, to actually win this amount of titles, to be in a position to overtake Michael Schumacher as having the most drivers' championships in the history of the sport, I definitely think it kind of crystallises the achievement of what that is, whereas maybe prior to Drive to Survive, the casual fan perhaps didn't quite understand just what an outrageous achievement this is. And I guess there's definitely an element around Hamilton that he is underappreciated, and that definitely changes. Like, it's true when it comes to the backroom teams, those little stories that you get throughout the series of people messing up in a pit stop or whatever it is, like, you're not going to get that otherwise. You're not going to get that on Sky Sports in the weekend. So of course that has completely transformed people's appreciation of that. So I accept that it's done a good job, but I think the sport has done the best job for itself this season, because it's been absolutely incredible. Abu Dhabi next weekend, as I say, it's all level pegging. So that is Verstappen in the red, first up this morning in the performance rankings. Tuchel's Chelsea are in the red here as well, Ger. This is something that we've kind of flip-flopped on a little bit on the show over the last little while. I think you were knock on Chelsea a month ago, then during the week you're like, hold on, I'm seeing signs of life here. Yeah.
And after the weekend, David Moyes did it.
When it went 2-1, I was like, I was right to get back on the Chelsea bandwagon, and they were creating chance after chance, and I was like, this is going to be a bit of a hammering here. And then it just wasn't. It definitely felt more self-inflicted at the weekend than it needed to be. Like, that's the first, I would say, crack in the edifice of the keeper that I've seen since he arrived. Because I actually, he's not at Ederson's level just yet, but like, could he get there? It felt like he could. And so that's just a little bit of a step backwards. I'm less, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to make of Chelsea at the moment, because I definitely didn't think that Lukaku was going to be the perfect fit for this group automatically. And, when you make a big signing like that, you feel like, I've got this very expensive car, toy, whatever bad analogy you want to make, and so I need to use it and take it out. And it's like, well, actually, everybody was going quite well before that, so like a brilliant game with loads of top quality goals, and then a howler of a keeper error at one stage. I don't know. It was an excellent game, and I don't want to read too much into it, because these title races are so interesting. Like, if you look at the psychology of what happened, that was the early kickoff on Saturday, and Liverpool couldn't score. They just couldn't score for 93, 94 minutes. And then when Divock Origi does score, it's like, I don't want to say it's fluky, but it goes through the keeper's legs and the defender's legs. You're like, Liverpool were obviously watching the result and feeling the pressure, and it's brilliant. It's really, like, you forget how enthralling these title races are, because all of a sudden, a game that you expect Liverpool to win, and again, they created a lot of chances, they just can't do it because of the pressure. And then they do it. You're like, ooh, that seems like this massive moment. And they celebrated wildly at the end of it. So it's difficult. Do you put Tuchel's team properly in the red because of this? Or is this just one of those things where actually the pressure's not on them next week now? All of a sudden the pressure's on somebody else. That's how this shifts for the next 2 or 3 months. And that's why we love it.
I think there's definitely going to be limited sympathy out there for any of the excuses that come out of Chelsea is one of the things that the injuries seems to be held up as a reason why Chelsea are faltering at the moment and have had a couple of disappointing results. But really, a team with that budget, the signings that they've made over the last little while, to be pointing towards injuries, I think nobody will have any sympathy for that whatsoever. Like, even some of the players that they brought off the bench, Lukaku, Pulisic and Hudson-Odoi were the players they brought off. Saul didn't play, Werner didn't play, Ross Barkley, your friend Ross Barkley, didn't play. Like, I mean, there is sensational depth in that squad, even with a relatively unfortunate run of injuries. But they put themselves into this position of being vulnerable to the crazy, and there have been a couple of results, and I would even include Manchester United last week as a relatively crazy result. When you look at the statistics, when you look at the dominant team, wasn't it Burnley a few weeks before that, and then they've ended up getting beaten by West Ham. Granted, a bizarre goal to win it, and as you say, we haven't seen too many cracks in Mendy before, but this was certainly one of the first times, and on 2 occasions perhaps he just went away from the norm of being an outstanding goalkeeper, and this sort of stuff happens. But I just think they're vulnerable at the moment at certain points, and they're vulnerable in a way that they shouldn't be vulnerable. Whereas Liverpool now, all of a sudden, it's like, is this 2019, 2020 all over again? And I must say, like, the Divock Origi story is fascinating, and Jurgen Klopp spoke about him after the game like somebody who was going through a very friendly breakup. He said, I hope Divock Origi finds a manager who properly appreciates him down the line. I really hope that he finds the one for him. And there's almost this sense of regret that, you know, Jota and Firmino and Mane and Salah are just so concrete in their places ahead of him that he will never break into that top 4 strikers unless injuries fall upon them. And you know what? He gave him his due afterwards, and he's come up with so many amazing moments for that club.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting too. They just got to make sure they pay Mo Salah, right? Like, if they don't pay Mo Salah leaves, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, Divock, we always loved you. I mean, I don't know where you got the idea that we thought that you were 5th choice, 5th of 5. No. So I don't look. It's funny when he talks like that after the game, but surely somebody in Origi's orbit is like, you could make loads more money somewhere else being the number 1 guy. You could probably score 15 to 25 goals a season in the right setup, at least 15. You know, is he as good as Dominic Calvert-Lewin? I'm not sure, but like, could he be one of those strikers that everybody talks about? He's still only, 25, 26? There's another 8 years of him considering himself to be at his peak. I don't know. It's just dangerous when you start telling people that, like, we love you, but somebody might love you more.
Yeah, his agent could do a pretty good job. Maybe I guess that's probably one of a bit of a testament to Klopp, isn't it? That somebody can come off the bench and be so content with that impact sub role and score loads of goals. And Klopp said he's one of the best finishers he's ever worked with, and still doesn't get enough game time. But maybe after Jota's miss on Saturday, maybe Origi sniffing around for a starting spot the next day, because that was pretty incredible, and he did get hooked, I guess. That is the red, I guess, unless you got anything more to add. Go for it.
The Wolves player did save it with his balls, right? Are we confirming that? Was it definitely? It looked. They didn't linger on it too much on the TV, but it was like, yeah, that is good quality, top quality defending right there.
And Conor Cody did run for a good few seconds afterwards, just like kind of down on his hunkers almost. He'd shrunk by 2 feet as he was crouched over trying to sprint back and get back into the defensive line. I thought he just got winded personally. I'm not 100% sure though. Right. But that was an absolutely extraordinary miss. We were going to touch back on that with Mark Lawrence a little bit later on, and we will also be touching on Manchester United, who are sort of in the amber, Ger. We're not putting Manchester United in the amber. We're putting Manchester United predictions in the amber, because it's pretty hard to call where this thing is going at the moment. Or at least a week ago, people who thought they knew what was going to happen maybe already showing signs of cracks in those predictions.
Very interesting team selection, wasn't it? I thought that these next 3 or 4 team selections are going to be very interesting to see how much game time he gives people, who he's trying to check out, who he's not interested in checking out, and how much rope he gives certain players to, all right, that was your chance, we gave you your opportunity, you didn't perform. And to be doing that while you're winning games, that's going to feel good for Rangnick. I mean, I don't like to blow my own trumpet on this, unless, of course, it's after the crappy quiz, which all bets are off. But on Friday, on our new weekend kickoff show with Sky, I was saying, I think Fred might be the big winner here. And even last week, in the middle of the game, I was tweeting, is Fred good now? But the realization that Fred's actually not a central defensive midfielder, that he was bought as a forward or a forward playing midfielder. If he is setting the press, if it's his job to be the one who is the kind of quarterback for the press, he can do that job, right? That's actually a job that he's very good at. Now, remember the chip that he tried to score? What game was that?
I can't remember.
Chelsea? Was it the Chelsea game? And he was getting daggers from Ronaldo, and they're like, this is a sign of how bad he is. But actually, it was fairly audacious, and he was trying something that was a little bit different, and he had the confidence to take it on himself. Didn't work out, but you want your players to be confident. So look, I mean, how is this going to work out? Again, the evidence is very, very early, but it suggests that he didn't seem to miss Michael Carrick's coaching or his presence generally. And I don't know. It's like Van de Beek's on the bench. What's going to happen with Rashford? What's going to happen with Greenwood? Are we sure 100% that Rangnick is going to be so emotionally involved in getting players through from the academy? Or is he like, well, that's 15 million and that's 35 million. Give me the money and I'm going to spend that on 2 kids from the Leipzig Academy or from Poland or wherever.
Yeah, it was interesting listening to Rangnick afterwards, giving a pretty open breakdown of why he went with the 4-2-2-2 and talking about the thought process behind that. Obviously, some cliched, simple stuff like not wanting to change the team around too much since Arsenal, but he said he went with Ronaldo, Rashford in attack, Sancho and Fernandes in the 2-10 positions, and then we need enough space with Bruno and Jadon for our full-backs to play forward in the wing, and they almost played like wing-backs. And I mean, I think Telles and Dallo was a phrase that was actually trending on Twitter yesterday. Did extremely well offensively, he said. That's why I played the 4-2-2-2. I'm a big fan. The most challenging, demanding positions in that formation are the 2-10s. And that's interesting that he refers to Sancho and Fernandes' positions as the 2 most challenging positions. And I don't know, there's always this thing thrown around when a team is doing poorly, or perhaps when their press isn't looking too good, that the players aren't up to the level of effort that's required. And I think over the next little while that's going to be proved to be a bit of a nonsense, as we see Sancho and Fernandes perhaps fit in pretty well to this and fit in well into a system that will require a lot of effort. And then of course it'll come down to Ronaldo, and Rangnick praised Ronaldo after the game for his willingness to carry out the high pressing style. What Ronaldo did against the ball, chapeau, said Ralph Rangnick. So that the highest possible compliment to him. A couple of really interesting ones, like United won possession in the final third on 12 occasions, more than in any other game this season. So immediately, statistically, you're seeing an uptick in there. And the other one, this is from James Ducker's analysis piece in the Telegraph. This was United's first clean sheet at Old Trafford in any competition for 235 days, even despite the weather getting in the way of an extra training session this week. It seems that he's had an immediate impact, or maybe the players are just happy with the new fresh voice and have a bit of a pep in the step as a result.
Yeah, and we've been hearing Daniel Harris in particular talk about Anthony Elanga on the show over the last 18 months, quite significant amounts. And my first game, I'm going to put him in there. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Like that's the whole squad is suddenly on fire in every training session going, well, I've got a chance here. The new guy might not be like the old guy who had his clear mind made up and had everybody who's been around the place for the last 2 decades telling him stuff, whereas actually, no, you're going to get a chance. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see exactly what happens. And on the basis of his press conference and his first performance, give me your overreaction Monday take here.
I mean, things are going in the upward trajectory. Manchester United an absolute lock for top 4. Like that's and that's not even an overreaction, it feels, at this point, given the mood music. We're going to have John in a little bit later on. I'd be keen to get his take on where Spurs are actually going to end up this season, because that's the real wild card here, isn't it? That it seems that Manchester United, they will look after their own end of the bargain and they will come pretty close to the top 4. Now, I mean, maybe West Ham keep on winning. Maybe West Ham keep on knocking out the big guns and maybe that's a true wild card. But I think really, as the season goes on, United and Spurs, that cream will sort of rise. But I think Spurs are a problem maybe for Manchester United, and I don't think it'll be overly straightforward. But if you're asking me to overreact and say what's going to happen, I think Manchester United are going to take that top 4 spot.
Right. Villa only 8 points behind West Ham. Just want to point that out.
We were saying that a couple of weeks ago that Villa finishing in the top half will be an extraordinary result, because given their really good season last season, they didn't even finish in the top 10. Now I know they tailed off at the end of the year, but I think there was a general sense out there that if Gerrard could match what Dean Smith did last season, that would be an exceptionally good season for Gerrard.
I've changed my mind. I want top 4. That's it. Top 4 or bust. What's the point? Got to be a winner. Winning mentality on. That's what he wants.
The other thing we need to mention here is when it comes to the reason why we put Manchester United predictions in the amber is that one of the bad predictions that people had was that Brendan Rodgers was going to become Manchester United manager in the summer.
Yeah, not going to happen anymore. Like you can't be in charge of a team like Leicester and continuously concede the same goal again and again and again and again and again, because they've just come through a period where there was a manager who couldn't identify what the problems were and change them. And so Leicester City keep conceding goals from set pieces. Villa ripped them apart from set pieces again yesterday, and Villa leapfrogged them. Leicester are now 11th. Like, they've had one of those seasons where they're playing great. They're getting loads of kudos. Their manager could be the new manager of Manchester United. He's not going to be the manager of Manchester United. That's gone. That ship has sailed. He needed, while all this was happening, he needed to put together a run of 4 or 5 victories in a row. The team to be really aggressive, and him just be like, no, I'm going about my business here. I don't know what you're talking about. But whatever has happened, maybe the players have subconsciously stopped playing at the same level they were at. But I think that he's out of the running. That's my prediction is, Brendan Rodgers' time coming at Old Trafford anytime soon.
It's interesting. Like, I did feel there was even a level of conversation around Brendan Rodgers that he was an unrealistic target for some clubs. I'm not really saying Manchester United, but maybe when the Tottenham job came up, there was perhaps a tone that Rodgers wouldn't leave Leicester for Tottenham. There was that feeling that the project is too good at Leicester.
Yeah.
Like, it does seem that things have changed really quickly. Like, I mean, like the last time he was asked about the job, he's saying stuff like it's really disrespectful to even ask the question. Like, has the peak come and gone at Leicester? Was his opportunity to get back to one of the top clubs? Was that actually last summer after they won the FA Cup? Did he get too wrapped up in the emotion of that? I wonder.
Well, I don't think his time at Leicester is going to come to a failure because he was somewhat distracted or whatever happened over the last while. Like, I think he can still turn around at Leicester. It's just that window for when the job selection is happening. It's happening at the moment. They're having these conversations, and you compare and contrast with Rangnick, what's happened, and over the next couple of months, right? Like, let's not overreact totally in our overreaction section here, but I don't know. Like, the other thing is Conte has walked in and looked like an adult, and Spurs seem like a club who are unified and making the effort. I'd be interested to see the change in stats from them. Are they all suddenly running more? Now, Grant, it's Norwich. We didn't talk about this, but Andrew Omobamidele started, Adam Ida started. They got beaten 3-0. It's not a great experience for them, but at the same time, they're getting some game time. So Nathan Collins played the full game, back-to-back again.
Yeah. Not
a bad weekend for the Irish.
No, absolutely not. So we'll come back to that, as I say, with Mark Lawrence in just a few moments. He'll be with us at around 8:10 this morning. We'll get into the good, a couple of things to get stuck into here. The club GAA, first of all. I'm not sure what everybody at home was watching, but get in touch with any good stories from the weekend. For me, it was looking at Kilmacud. It was looking at the Kerry final. I mean, just to quickly mention Kilmacud, first of all, I know he's been spoken about quite a bit, but I'm not sure. Is there still a level of underappreciation for Paul Mannion? Maybe not. Maybe there's an absolute appreciation. But if you're judging things in the context of pre-2019, I still feel that maybe we didn't quite realise how gifted this guy was and how possibly generational a talent he was until 2019, and he's obviously showing that this year throughout the season with Kilmacud. And it's just the range of his kicking. It's the long range bombs from Paul Mannion. I think it was 5-4 from play yesterday, and that was such a feature of him in the Dublin shirt as well, that when the story comes to be written about Dublin, yes, it will come down to a very calm, collected, a very practical way of taking your scoring from the scoring zone, and yet you had this corner forward who was able to ping the ball over the bar from any angle, and Jim Gavin sort of gave him that allowance, that if somebody was going to ping the ball over from outside the scoring zone, it was either going to be Diarmuid Connolly in the early Jim Gavin years or Paul Mannion in the late Jim Gavin years. And as a point taker, as a sharpshooter from anywhere in the forward line, he'll have to go down as one of the greatest. And the conversation has been had plenty of times about whether or not Dublin could use him next year. There's no question that they could, but I'm not sure he will go back, because I'd say he's enjoying life right now. He's getting this competitive edge, and they're going pretty well.
Yeah. There's a time that we revisited some of our hot takes about the Dubs and how the production line was going to keep belching out lads like that, because maybe we got that wrong. I know my friends who are proper Dublin football people were like, the next generation is nowhere near as good as this generation. Like, stop banging on about how we're going to have a constant supply of top quality players who are just ready, waiting to go. Because it turns out they don't. Like, they haven't been able to replace fully all of the players that they had. And their depth has now reached a point where like next season are any of, now that Dublin have been beaten by a Mayo side who were subsequently beaten, are people really going to fear them next year? You know, an angry Dublin, it's like, well, how angry can they be with it? Like, what's the difference going to be between them and last year and this year? I'm not quite sure.
I think questioning how angry Dublin are going to be is a very, very dangerous thing. Like, I have them right.
Well, that's just because you're from Kerry, you're terrified of it.
Right in at the top of the pile again next year. Like, if they get Mannion back, I think it's absolutely it changes the face of next year completely. The other thing to mention then from yesterday, it's on a lot of the back pages. Stars Align for Stacks is the Independent, and Star Reborn is the Irish Examiner. It's Kieran Donaghy celebrating as Austin Stacks went level with Dr. Crokes at the top of the county champions honours roll. Like, it's a double this year for Austin Stacks. They won 3 in a row in the club championship. This was the county championship to beat Kearns O'Rahilly's yesterday, the first time since the 60s that 2 Tralee teams took part in the county final. It was a bit of a disaster for O'Rahilly's, to be quite honest with you. I know the game wasn't on TV. I was watching it on the stream myself. Gavin O'Brien, one of their better players, gets injured before the game even starts. I think he does his hamstring in the warm-up, and then within 5 minutes David Moran gets injured, and from that point it's curtains almost for Rahilly's. And as the game progresses, I mean, it's Austin Stacks who hold on to a 3-point lead and a comfortable enough 3-point lead as things turn out. They took out 3 divisional teams on the way to this win. It was a phenomenal season for them, and I'd say a pretty sweet one to get one over their Tralee rivals in the end. So that is pretty much the GAA from yesterday. Just quickly then to mention,
and now Stacks are playing in the Nations Leage, right? They're or is it the Euros?
It is both. They're whatever you want to call it. Whatever you want to call it. The confusing part is done, Ger. I mean, the Nations League is over. The format is over. It's into Munster now with Stacks.
I mean, Donaghy is a phenomenon. Like, he's been a phenomenon for a long, long time. But to be still at the very end, winning, like being involved in the thing that wins the match or prevents the game from going to extra time, is phenomenal. Like, I think we underappreciate Donaghy. You know, if you're talking about Mannion a little bit earlier on, I think that, like, the longevity in 2 sports, that, like, how meaningful his ability to talk to his teammates and to, I don't know, I think Armagh are very lucky to have him involved.
Yeah, for sure. I think he retired a year too soon, maybe even 2 years too soon for Kerry. I think if he was there in 2019, things could have been a little bit different. It's going to be interesting. Like, there was talk. I'm not sure how real this was. This is definitely me regurgitating like WhatsApp talk or like complete idle chat in the pub here. But there was like talk a couple of weeks ago that even if Stacks had won the game, that David Moran would potentially be Kerry captain next year because there just isn't enough options in Austin Stacks county-wise to actually have a captain. And I think that will change over the next little while. I think they've been so impressive. Even they've had a brilliant system. They've got a great manager, great coaching, great defensive system. But there have been some individual players for this team who look outstanding. And now putting a first-year player in as captain might be a little bit of a stretch. But there's a guy, Joe O'Connor, who plays in midfield, who's been involved with Kerry in the past, played last year. He's going to have a bigger part next year. And Kerry might have found their new full back as well. There's a 21-year-old kid, Dylan Casey. He was given the captaincy for Austin Stacks this year. So he's clearly got a real level of maturity, like ahead of Donaghy, ahead of some of the older players, been given that captaincy, played alongside David Clifford in that minor team and was outstanding all throughout the championship, destroyed his man, every single person he came up against, and chipped in on the attacking side of things as well. Possibly one to watch out for next year in Jack O'Connor's team. So that's the GAA wrapped up. Just very quickly, just to mention the FA Cup final at the weekend, Chelsea 3, Arsenal 0 on TV. Plenty of people saw this in a busy day of sport yesterday. I think the moment that everybody caught their eye was the chip from Sam Kerr, an absolutely incredible finish. And I guess Emma Hayes talking in the aftermath of the game, out of this world, I think she described Sam Kerr and Frank Kirby, the third women's team to secure a domestic treble with that win yesterday. And it's not as if they're up against nobody. This is a real rivalry, this Arsenal-Chelsea thing, and Arsenal completely outclassed yesterday.
Yeah, and like we've heard Katie McCabe talk in the past about the importance of watching, in her instance, Emma Byrne playing in a match and thinking, I could do that. So the representation that game was on terrestrial UK TV, which obviously was carried in most people's homes here as well, and the fact that we did have an Irish woman playing in the game, albeit on the losing side and getting hammered. It's going to be very interesting to see the unstoppable juggernaut of momentum behind the women's game is there for all to see at this point. And what a finish! Like what a finish! Because you know, at that stage Arsenal are pushing everybody forward, and actually I think Katie McCabe gets caught a little bit. One of her teammates gets caught in possession. She's slightly out of position. The ball gets pinged in behind her. And it's just one of those finishes that you're like, anybody who watches that game live as a kid is going to be out in the back garden practicing that, trying to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Right, it is 10 minutes past 8 on this Monday morning. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. That is it for this morning's performance rankings.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.